All right, welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining tonight's session. I am so excited about the topic for tonight, and also I have the great honor of introducing my colleague and friend, Sherif Ismail, and he will talk about the topic of diversity in U.S. higher education. So a little bit about Sherif. He graduated from Texas A&M Commerce with a Master's of Arts in Applied Linguistics, TESOL, and a Master's of Education in Educational Leadership. Sherif is a Texas certified school principal and principal as an instructional leader. He currently serves as an English language fellow at the U.S. Embassy in Mongolia, serving as an English teacher at ErdNet Institute of Technology, and previously as an instructional specialist at the Department of Education in Bulgan, Mongolia. Sherif serves as an ESL instructional specialist at Spring Branch Independent School District in Houston for 4 years, an ESL educator at Houston Independent School District for 3 years, and as a part-time Arabic language consultant and instructor at Rice University for 2 years. Sherif taught ESL to middle school students in Houston, Texas for 5 years. Meanwhile, he presented in the TESOL 4 conference in Houston and led several TESOL professional developments for public school teachers. Sherif taught ESL to refugees in Houston, mainly from Cuba, Afghanistan, Iraq, Iran, Sudan, Ethiopia, and Myanmar. In addition, he taught Berlitz English levels to oil and gas engineers from Angola, Brazil, and China at Berlitz Houston. Sherif also served as an English instructor at Berlitz, Egypt, teaching Berlitz English levels to business executives and corporate staff, as well as students at different Egyptian universities. He participated in the School Reform Project in Egypt in 2010 through Berlitz Egypt, training teachers on modern teaching techniques and Berlitz English levels. In 2009, Sherif was nominated as a Fulbright FLTA teaching Arabic at Allegheny College in Meadville, Pennsylvania. In 2012, Sherif taught ESL and READA KSA while also serving as a part-time SAT test security auditor working with a Mideast, Saudi Arabia, and the College Board. We are so grateful to have you here, Sherif, to share your knowledge, and thank you so much for your time. I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Claire. Thank you for this introduction, and it's good to see you for our session today. As mentioned by Claire, my name is Sherif Ismail. I'm actually I was born in Saudi Arabia, grew up immigrant. So I thought to talk to you about my experience as an immigrant and somebody who moved to the U.S., studying in the U.S. Icebreaking activity in the chat, share your name, most popular food in your country. Type in how to say hi or thank you in your language. Yeah, that's it for now. So let's go ahead and thanks, Claire. Hamburgers in America. Mongolia, I'd say Suvan. How many participants do we have here? Okay, yeah, we have some answers now. Rendang, I don't know. Is it from? Yeah, from Indonesia. Most popular food is beef Oh, okay, so that makes sense. It's sushi in Japan. I love sushi. That's why I want to visit Japan at some point, and I'll probably eat a lot of sushi. Okay, Ari, perfect. Thank you so much for sharing. And now we have more questions. I have more questions for you right here. What are the students from diverse backgrounds might face in applying for higher education in the US? So we can go ahead and type this in the chat. Sorry. So what are some challenges you think international students from diverse backgrounds might face in applying for higher education in the US? If I were an international student, I'll probably think about funding and affording to study in the US. Okay, somebody's okay, Mongolia, Darnod. Okay. Buds, yeah, Buds is very popular in Mongolia. Okay, different expectations of their home country versus in the US. Okay, thanks for sharing, Claire. Different culture. Okay, language barrier. Okay. Connections, making friends, an opportunity. Okay, let's move in to the next question. What would you like to learn by the end of this session? What is it you want to learn by the end of this session? Well, what would you like to learn? And how many people do we have participating here? Quite a lot. Thank you for coming. Okay, so right now we're answering the question. Any answers? Okay. What is it like to learn at the US, in the US as a with Islamic background? That's an excellent question. Thank you so much for sharing this. I would like to learn whether if there are any impacts on international students after here. Okay, I have no idea about this, so I might not be able to answer this question or give information about it. How to get a good job and stay in the US legally? That's a good question too. Cultural differences, language barrier. Okay, thank you so much for this feedback. Then we're gonna move forward. I have a picture for you of in my classroom in Houston, Texas. I used to teach middle school, and that was the Arab American Heritage Day. So I dressed like an Arab, even though where I grew up in Egypt. But I thought it's cool, so I wore that day. But that was my classroom in Houston. Here's the agenda. Today we're going to be talking about in the US, the importance of diversity in the US higher education, landscape of diversity in the US higher education. And I have a lot of data for you to analyze with me to make it as beneficial as possible for you and for everybody who would be attending this later on the recorded session on YouTube. So I got some data about international students admission data, international students financial aid data, rights of international students and scholars in the United States, immigrant and refugee scholars who. And here we have a slide about embracing diversity, equity, and inclusion. We hear a lot about these terms, but a lot of difference between diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. And we're going to be discussing this here. So what do you think diversity? You can type in the chat too. What diversity encompasses all characteristics that make such as race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, abilities, and okay, moving to equity. Tricky because a lot of people don't understand the difference between equity and equality. Do we know the difference between equity and equality? Let's type this in the chat. This is a very. What is the difference between equity and equality? Like, for example, if you have some students in your classroom, do you treat them the same, or should you treat them? Should you ensure that you have equality in your classroom, or should you ensure that you have equity in your classroom? What do you think? What? Let's type in the chat. Anybody? Excellent. Somebody said treat them based on their conditions or situations. That's equity. Excellent. Exactly. In our classroom, we have differences. We might have students from different backgrounds, you know, and we should accommodate their needs, and that's equity. In higher education refers to the principle of ensuring fairness and access to educational opportunities by identifying and addressing barriers that may impact certain groups, such as race, these individuals from low-income backgrounds, first generation, college students, and students with disabilities. And here we have in the picture, we have the difference between and reality. Reality, all the students might be different. They're not the same. What are some differences that our students might have? They might come from cultural backgrounds, different mental abilities, language abilities. And I don't know if you know this or not, but the ESL program lawsuit in California, where Chinese American family, they sued the government, and after that, the ESL became law in the United States. So any student who enrolls in a public school and their parents speak a different language, they have to be enrolled in the ESL program. So it was a result of a lawsuit. Equality, which is you're treating everybody the same, you know. Here you have equity, you're given accommodations for each person to reach the. Okay. Now we looked at diversity, equity. Now we're going to look at inclusion. What do you think inclusion means? And what's the opposite of? Oh, interesting. Thanks for sharing this, Claire. I never heard about like and interesting. And he said it depends on the culture. Okay. Anybody has the opposite of inclusion is exclusion. Excellent. Inclusion refers to deliberate and ongoing effort to ensure that all individuals, regardless of differences, feel valued, respected, and supported within a particular setting. So everybody is included regardless of their religion, ability. Everybody should be feeling included. Okay, now we talked about diversity, equity. We're going to talk about some student organizations in the US that ensure inclusion and equity in terms of clubs, clubs, International Student Association, LGBT clubs, religious organizations such as the Jewish on campus, USA. We also have National Black Graduate Student Association, Club Hispano Americano. These are all examples of student organizations. So universities in the US, you can join. You will definitely find some of these clubs, or you can start your own club. Why is diversity important in the US? Diversity is important in the US because it enriches the educational experience. It promotes personal. It strengthens communities and the workplace, and the list goes on. I don't know speech on diversity, but if you look up the internet on Obama's speech on diversity, you would understand why diversity is very important in the US. I think he mentioned about and how America is very prominent when it comes to sports because we have sportsmen and women that participate from all the DNAs that we want. That makes us a very strong nation as Americans. Okay. Data for you, and that would be a good practice if you're taking the SAT task 1 writing question. You would be looking at a graph, and you have to look at the data here on this graph, and I want you to tell me what are the main patterns or trends of the data represented in representing diversity in this graph. Any observations or thoughts? What's rising? What's falling? You can go ahead and write this in the chat. And by the way, this data is not international students. This is just diversity in the US. So we're talking about American students from different backgrounds. So Hispanic Americans, Black Americans, white Americans. Oh, good question, Claire. Claire says why there's no data before 2004 for Asians. Interesting. Any other observations? Okay, America continues to increase in its diversity in higher education. That's correct. Nothing is declining. Somebody's saying, I wonder what's declining. I don't think anything is declining. But we see a major increase in the diverse backgrounds being in higher education. And we see that Asian American 2% in 2014, right? This is not recent data, but this is just an example of diversity in the US and higher education. Moving forward, we're going to be looking at in data. But I want to ask you, how many international students do you think study in the US? Can you make a guess? The population of the US is around 300 million, I think. So how many international students do you think study in the United States? 2 million, maybe. Okay. Close. Very close. Okay, let's go ahead and look. This data is from 2003 to 2023, so it's pretty much data. And here we have some questions for you. What is the approximate number of international students in the year 2003? What do you think is the cause of fluctuation in the international students admission between the year 2019 and 2021? So go ahead and type. Good job. COVID-19, yes. A little bit of fluctuation here. There is decrease in the number of international students being admitted again. But how many international students do we roughly have here? Almost a million students, international students. And the number stays roughly the same, but it's an increase. Like if you notice from 2008, the number is 2009, we only have 723,000 international students. And now we're talking about 1 million international students study. Okay, I have another graph for you right here. This is about the percentage of international student population or the by country of origin from the year 2021 to the year 2022. And here we have different student population: East Asia, Europe, Southeast and Central Asia, Middle East and Africa. And I have some questions for you. What are the main patterns and trends of data and diversity? Is there an increase or decrease in any number, in any student population group, do you think? We see one student population group that has the highest amount of students. This is which region or which student population is this, do you think? Anybody? It's East Asian students, right? Okay. I guess Asia would be increasing because of growing population. And correct. So we see here, according to this data, the biggest number of student group is from East Asia. And what is the smallest number of students? Where are they from? Maybe right here, right? Europe would be next, right? But then the second largest group after East Asia would be South. So we see a lot of Asian students here in this data. Okay, moving. National student enrollment by degree type. We have non-degree programs, graduate and undergraduate, and practical training programs. I also have some questions for you. What are the main patterns and trends of the data representing diversity? What do you think? Graduate, correct. Graduate has the biggest portion of the pie chart. There are so many international students who are pursuing their graduate studies in the US compared to undergraduate international students. Moving forward with the data. I collected this data for you because before you apply for graduate school, you need to make there are so many questions you need to ask yourself. One of these questions is which school you need to apply for. So of course you need to do your research for you about international admission, and you want to look for schools that have high rate for international admission, and you can find for you. And I'm going to be sharing this PowerPoint presentation by the end of this session with you, so you can take a look at this data yourself, and you can actually manipulate it like the way you want. So here I arranged this data by choosing international students acceptance rate. So I looked at the colleges that international admission student international admission rate, and it's Georgia College and State University. Out of 11 applicants, 11 students were accepted, and we have here international students first year enrollment 9. look at this data, find out the school that has very high international student admission rate, so you can apply for these schools. I have another graph for you here. And here we have two graphs. Here we have the number of aid, and here we have 20 U.S. colleges that most aid foreign students. Harvard on the top, but Harvard is very competitive, of course. They will be given a lot of aid, but you will be in a very international applicants for so many other countries. I'd assume that they admit students with high GRE scores or academic record, but they do provide, according to this data, a lot of financial aid, and the list goes on. Again, you can find this data on this, sharing this PPT, and then you can do your own search to make sure that you find a school that has high admission, has high financial aid support for international students. Okay, so the reason I brought this data for you is I wanted to let you know how important it is to do your research before you upload. It can be expensive. Sometimes you'd have to pay for the application. You have to send your GRE scores, and each GRE score that you send to a university can be, you have to pay for it. If you're going to be applying for schools, so you want to make sure that you you do your research and you pick the right schools that you're going to apply for.
For the GRE, I believe that, sorry to interrupt. For the GRE, I think you are allowed to select up to 3 schools to send it to, and any additional schools after that cost money. But of course, taking the GRE itself does cost money, or any of the other exams like GMAT or the MCAT or whatever you would take.
That's a good tip, Claire. So the first 3 are you have to pay for them, and then after these 3, they're sent for free?
No, the first 3 are free.
Okay, the first 3 reports are free.
Yes.
Oh, okay, right. That makes sense. Okay. So the first 3 are for free, and then after that, you'd have to pay for each into a different school, right?
Right.
Correct. Okay. Okay, moving forward here, I prepared anybody who's interested in undergrad. I know this session is for grad students or grad prospective students, but just in case if anybody's interested in financial aid, this is a really good website that walks you through how to apply for financial aid and how to find the right school. And here we have a question. As a citizen, do I have rights? What rights do I have? Yes, you do. You do have rights. All individuals have basic rights, regardless of immigration status or citizenship. So immigration status, it doesn't matter if you are green card holder, visa holder, or F1, country of origin, it doesn't matter what country you're coming from, if you have a citizenship or not, or if you still have rights. All individuals in the U.S. have the following rights. You have the right of freedom of speech, freedom of expression, peaceful assembly, and freedom of religion means, for example, for Muslims, if it's the Eid holiday and you can't attend the class, you can ask the school for religious needs that you have to attend the Eid. And if it's a public school and they're funded by the government, they should let you be absent that day. That could be different. And we're going to be looking at this in the next slide. Or if you're a Jewish student and you have to attend a certain holiday, they also have to accommodate your religious needs. If you have to I think based on this, you can be accommodated based on your the needs that need to be accommodated. Freedom from illegal search and seizure. Worst case scenario, if you get arrested or something. But again, you can read these on the internet. I found this information on Indiana University website, but all this information, they stem from the law in the US. And here I wanted to talk about Title 6. Title 6 states that no person on the ground of race, color, national origin, meaning whichever country you're coming from, be excluded from participation and be denied the benefits of any program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. So if any college in the US is receiving federal financial assistance, meaning receiving money from the government, all educational institutions, including pre-K, that's pre-K schools, that's not universities too, but actually it includes universities here. All educational institutions, including pre-K, elementary, secondary, public schools and school districts, public and private, and other post-secondary institutions that receive federal financial assistance, meaning they receive funds from the government, are required to comply with the. If you're in a private school and they don't receive federal funding, I'm not sure if they're obligated to abide by this rule or not, but if it's a public school or a school that receives funding from the government, then they have to abide by this. Here are some tips that I have for you that I myself had these challenges undergrad or grad schools when I was in Egypt. First, make sure you choose your major wisely based on the job market that you live in a country that has a lot of mining industry. So I think if you get a master's in mining, that would help you back to your country. Or make sure you plan, take the time to plan what you want to study based on the market needs. Or you know what you're doing after this degree, because if you do a master's degree or a PhD degree, you're investing a lot of time of your life, investing money. So after you finish the program, make sure you have a plan what you want to do with this degree. Okay. If you look up the jobs online, jobs usually will have some, they will tell you what they're looking for. You know, we're looking you know, like if you're planning to be, for example, a director of a TESOL program, jobs like these, and you can read the requirements and they will say, director of a TESOL program needs to have a PhD in linguistics. They're looking for, but make sure you do your research before you choose your major. Again, because it's a big investment of your time. Setting goals. You want to go study in the US? Why do you want to get a graduate degree in the US? Again, this is a big decision you're making. You're investing a lot of time and money. Proficiency, you want to get an academic degree, you want to migrate to the US. So you want to be very clear about your goals so you can make a really good plan. Also, based on these goals, you can do your research on using data and facts. Rely on facts more than or somebody to give you an advice. But when you have facts, data, okay, looking at the schools that give the most financial aid, these schools give the most financial aid, these schools have higher admission rates for international students. A lot of international students who graduated this school, they ended up living and working in the US. So do your research based on data. You can find Also application challenges that I myself found challenging when I was applying for, I'm actually a Fulbright alumnus. So the way I moved to the US, it's called the FLTA program. It's in every country. So if you're in Japan, for example, I assume it's in every country, I don't know. But if you're Japanese, for example, teach Japanese in the US for 1 year. It's called the Foreign Language Teaching Assistant Program. But there are so many other programs that, in the US Embassy website. One of them is, if you're considering a master's in the US, you actually apply for this program and they will help you a lot. So you can look up this program. It's called the Student Program. When I was filling in the application, I would see questions like first name or forename. That can be confusing. And in different cultures and different regions, people have different names, and it can be. In Egypt, where I grew up, we have 4 names. So that could be confusing. So looking at your passport, I'd assume the first name on the passport with names you have on the passport, like you choose the first name and put it on the application. The last name, I would say the last name, when it says your name on the passport, choose the last name. That would be the last name. This can be very confusing, especially in Mongolia. The names can be very confusing for me. To pronounce. So be very careful when you do your application and write your name. Make sure it matches your passport. Ask questions if you don't know, because your image, like when they send you the paper that you need to take to the embassy to get your F1 visa or J1 visa application. So be very, very careful. And then if it happens and you migrate to the US after that, then your name will be matching the name. And if the name doesn't match your name on the passport, when you fill in the application, when it comes to your name, ask questions if you don't know. Also, other challenges for LGBT students or students who define other than male or female, that might be challenging, but I don't have an answer to that. Maybe you can explain your gender on the personal statement, or you can ethnicities. There are some challenges with ethnicities on the applications. Like I found this challenging for me myself, being an Arab American. Egypt is considered to be in Africa, but it's actually in the MENA region, Middle East and North Africa. I get confused. I don't know what to put in the ethnicity, African, or they don't have one for Arab. It doesn't have Arab. Sometimes they do have Arab or Middle Eastern. Arab in the US, they would choose white, which is very interesting. So choose the one that best represents you, like Asian or whichever you. TOEFL and IELTS requirements for grad prospective students. I think if you studied, like for me in the US, because I've lived in the US for quite a while, I don't think I was required to take the TOEFL. Some schools, if you studied masters in English in the US, I don't think you have to take the TOEFL. And a lot of people don't know that. So if you studied your masters in the US, you already studied your master's, you don't have to take the TOEFL for a PhD or a doctorate program. But then it depends on the school, because I also studied my, when I tried to apply for Harvard, they actually asked me to take the TOEFL. I don't know why, but some schools have different requirements. IELTS or the different language tests out there. Duolingo is one that's coming up, and it's a really good test too. One of the challenges for schools is my undergraduate degree was from Egypt, and it was in Arabic, so I had to translate it. First, I had to translate it to. When I tried to apply for graduate schools in the US, if you send them like you have to send them your transcript in a closed. Okay, that might be very challenging if you are already in the US. So at that time, I was in the US and it was very hard for me to go back an envelope that's closed and stamped by the university. So what I did actually, I found a really good service. It's called Spantron. You can look it up. Actually, evaluate your credentials to make it look like an American certificate. So US institutions will understand your at a university where you don't have a GPA system. So the Spantron will transfer it. They will translate it, transfer it to the GPA system, show your credit hours, show your US school. They will understand how many credit hours you have, what is your major equivalent in the US, what's your GPA. Cool about this service is they can verify your certification. You would have to pay more, but they will send your transcript. They will send it in a closed envelope. It will satisfy this requirement by the university, which is, I find, a great service. If you find your transcript in a closed envelope stamped by university, they'll do it for you and they'll send it to your university. Okay, these are all the tips that I have for you from my own school. Okay. Do we have any questions so far? Could you please repeat the name of the service you used to translate? It's right here. You see? It's at the bottom right here. If you Google it, it'll come up right away. Okay. Some of the names of the immigrants and the refugee scholars who made America greater. One of them I didn't list here is you can look him up and you can Google his name. Francisco Jimenez came to the US as an illegal immigrant. He used to work in the farms in California and it's a very popular book. And actually, he got arrested in high school because during that time, you can't go to a public school if you're illegal. Like you wouldn't be getting arrested or anything. But at that time, he got arrested, he got deported, and he came back again to the US to become a professor. Now, of course, he's an American citizen, but he's one of the great heroes, immigrant heroes that I admire personally. Here we have some other great US and made America great again. Albert Einstein, of course, came in from Germany. Nikola Tesla, he came from Serbia. Came from South Africa. And Andy Grove came from Hungary. And I'm not sure if you know any other immigrants who came to study the history of the US or made America greater. You can share in the chat. Here is the presentation link, and I think I finished way too early. I'm gonna take too much of your time. We have a question and answer time now. Do you have any questions? Yes. Okay. Do we have any questions?
I'll start off with a question.
Sure.
So I guess this is more of a question. Maybe you can share about your experience or maybe of your students who were in your ESL classes. What were some of the challenges or differences in the education system or things that you had to learn that were different in the US compared to either your home country or maybe for your students, some things that were different about the education system that would be helpful to know?
That's a really good question, Claire, because the first time when I moved to the US, I actually happened to live I know we have schools in Egypt where you can live on campus, but I've never thought that I'd be able to live on campus in the US. And a lot of schools, you can actually also apply to live on campus, and they actually have meal plans, so you don't have to worry about the food. So this was one major difference for me. Campus. What would be another difference? I guess everything was different for me. The times of breakfast, lunch, and dinner. How Americans have lunch very early compared to where I grew up in Egypt. In Egypt, people usually eat lunch late, kind of, and dinner also what other differences? I think, yeah, that's pretty much it, I think. I see here the people mentioned here about wanting to learn by the end of the session. Somebody mentioned challenges that Muslim students might face in the US studying. I don't think there are any challenges you will face. Muslim community in every big city. For example, Houston, where I come from, there's a huge Muslim community. We have so many mosques. There's a big, depends on which state you go to, because every state has different type of diversity when it comes to religion, ethnic groups, national origin, but he big when it comes to the Muslim community. What other questions do we have here? Hi, Sherif, I have a question. If applicant want to apply for a PhD in the top universities like Harvard, Stanford, must be 4-degree bachelor or master? Oh, that's a really good question. I like this question. So yeah, some schools in the US, they don't require a master's to apply for a PhD. And I remember actually when I finished my Fulbright program and I went back to Egypt, I wanted to apply for grad school. So I applied for a lot of money during that time. I spent like $1,000. And one of the schools that I applied for a PhD. I don't remember the name of the school, but I didn't have a master's. The requirements of that program didn't require a master's. So if you want to know, you gotta visit the university's website. You gotta visit the requirements. Go to the program and see what the program requires exactly. Does it require a master's? Does it require prerequisite courses? Because some programs also they require these courses, especially if you're transferring your major. Like let's say I have 2 master's degrees. I have a master's in applied linguistics and I have a master's in university. But when I applied for my first master's in applied linguistics, they didn't ask me for any prerequisite courses because my master's was in English. I was going on the same track. When I tried to get my master in educational leadership, they also didn't ask me for any prerequisite courses because I already had a lot of was in English education. So I assume if I applied for a law degree or like some ask me for some prerequisite courses like math or science or stuff like that. So it's very, very important to check the program requirements. What are they asking you exactly? For a PhD directly without an MA, you can Google that. You can see if there are any programs who would do that for you. I'm sure you would find some. Okay, I would love.
Can I add to that, Sherif, just a little bit?
Sure.
I love that answer, and I think that that's very true. There are also programs in the US where it's a master's plus a PhD. So you may spend the first year or 2 working on the credits for your master's, and it's not always automatic, but you can continue on to your PhD, and some of that coursework from your master's will apply to your PhD as well. So I know that, for example, some programs at like Columbia University do that, and some other institutions. It definitely varies based on the school, but I've had several friends do, they started with a master's plus the PhD. They were in the PhD program, but they completed the coursework, earned their master's, and then continued their coursework and then earned their PhD.
Thanks. Thanks for sharing, Claire. We have another question saying, I would like to know what are major challenges studying in the US? Are cities are there cities in wheelchair friendly? Okay, yeah, I think there are. I think if it's a public school, like we mentioned before, according to Title 6, like we mentioned right here, that if it's funded by the government. I remember working at a public school, and public school is an educational, public schools are educational institutions. These laws, and we had a special aid department, and we had another section called 504, and 504 was dedicated like these, and they had all sorts of accommodation. I am not an expert when it comes to higher education, but I am sure by the government, that's what I'm sure about, they will be able to accommodate disability needs.
Yeah, to add on to that, there is a law, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and basically what it does is it requires that there are accommodations for accessibility. So if you are in a wheelchair or if you have crutches or things like that, that it is accessible, that the buildings are accessible, especially in public places, government buildings, universities, and as Sherif said, especially if they have public funding, they are required to follow that law. So many of these buildings, they will have those kinds of physical accessibility features. I also just want to mention, because I see in the chat about the presentation, this session is recorded and will be posted on the US Embassy Tokyo YouTube channel. I will post that link in the chat box.
Okay. Do we have any more questions? Thank you, Claire, for sharing the link. Okay, I would like to take this opportunity in this and for your hard work, dedicating your time and energy for the international community, educating everybody about higher education in the US, participating in this session and dedicating your time. I hope I was able to give you some new information or add value to your knowledge. And
Thank you very much, everyone, for your time.